The Gaza Health Ministry reports that since October 7th, more than 42,814 Palestinians have been killed, including nearly 16,765 children. Updated figures also show that over 97,886 people have been injured, with more than 10,000 missing under the rubble. In the West Bank, updated figures show that at least 749 people, including around 164 children, have been killed, with more than 6,250 people injured. Furthermore, in the last 24 hours, an Israeli strike on a school-turned-shelter in Gaza has killed at least 28 people.
المهم لا احنا ما سمعنا الا الصاروخ المدرسه، احنا ما سمعناهوش كمان بالمدرسه الا شفنا الغبره والاسخام والعفار وقطع اللحم والدمار كله علينا بالصفوف. طب لمتى هذا الحال بده يضل علينا؟ لمتى بدنا نضلنا مشردين؟ لامتى يعني؟ مين بده يحلنا من هالموضوع؟ هذا كل اللي احنا بنعاني فيه، بنعاني طبعا انت عارف نزوح وغلاء، ما فيش اموال، ما فيش اكل، ما فيش شرب، ما فيش امان ولا في اي منطقه من المناطق.
اليوم هم يعملون مجازر في دير البلح في الوسطى اللي بيقولوا على الناس تعالوا عليها بضربوا فيها. هذه مش من اول الحرب لحتى هذه اللحظه، وهم بضربوا مدنيين وبيستهدفوا مدنيين، وما في مكان آمن أبداً في كل القطاع.
Israeli airstrikes on central Beirut have killed 22 civilians and injured over 117. This represents a dangerous escalation in the ongoing Israeli conflict against Lebanon. The strikes targeted residential areas in Ras el-Nabar and al-Nuwairi, areas previously considered safe from direct military action, and came without warning. These attacks mark a troubling shift in Israel's military strategy. While previous airstrikes were focused on southern Beirut, the strikes on more central, densely populated areas suggest a deliberate widening of the Israeli campaign. Israel's lack of immediate comment on the Beirut airstrikes, coupled with its continued evacuation warnings for southern Beirut, adds to the growing sense of unpredictability. With hospitals overwhelmed and civilians left reeling, the airstrikes highlight the worsening humanitarian crisis in Lebanon.
Israel's siege of Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza represents a grim escalation in the ongoing conflict. Civilians have been trapped amid heavy bombardment, with over 220 Palestinians killed in the latest airstrike. The siege, part of a broader strategy to forcibly displace Palestinians from northern Gaza, has left the camp in chaos, with bodies littering the streets and no access to rescue or medical services. Reports from residents reveal the devastating human toll. Those who have ventured outside their homes have been shot at by Israeli drones, leaving dozens of dead people in the streets, unreachable by civil defense teams. Water scarcity poses the most immediate threat to survival, as the siege has cut off access to vital supplies. Only 2 of Jabalia's water wells remain functional, and humanitarian aid has been severely obstructed. Israel's campaign, targeting the camp with no warning, has sparked fears that this is the first phase for a broader displacement plan. For many, however, the decision is clear. They would rather die in their homes than abandon them, believing there is no safe place left in Gaza. During this, Palestinian journalists spoke about the killing and wounding of their fellow journalists during an Israeli military operation in Jabalia.
يريد لهذه الصورة ألا تصل للعالم من أجل أن تعري هذا الاحتلال الإسرائيلي استهداف مباشر لزملائنا الصحفيين، كما حدث اليوم مع الزميل محمد الطناني، وإصابة الزملاء فادي الوحيدي وتامر لبن. باستشهاد محمد الطناني أكيد وصلت إلى 176 زميل صحفي، ولا زال الاحتلال الإسرائيلي يلاحقنا كصحفيين هنا في شمال قطاع غزة، ولا ندري من سيكون الشهيد القادم من الزملاء الصحفيين إذا ما استمر هذا العدوان الإسرائيلي على شمال قطاع غزة.
More than a year into the Israel-Hamas war, Gazans in the southern city of Khan Yunis are set on preserving their Palestinian heritage. While Mohammed Sha'at has been clearing the historic Mamluk-era Barkut castle from rubble, Ramadan Ahmed, a researcher and artist, has spent decades collecting antiquities from destroyed museums and carving rocks to document the reality of Gazans under Israeli siege and bombardment.
هذا المكان بناء 1387 ميلادي بناه الملك باقوق، وسميت هذه قلعة باقوق. وهذا هو المكان، هو المعلم التاريخي لمدينة خان يونس، حيث أنها سميت مدينة خان يونس لأجل هذا المكان. قمت بتنظيف هذا المكان لعدة يعني إرجاع المكان هذا من جديد، وإحياء الذكرى وإحياء التراث الفلسطيني وإحياء معالم خان يونس، وكي أعيد مجد هذا المكان.
كان هنا متحف، وكانت هنا حياة، وكانت هنا ما يثبت الهوية الفلسطينية من آثار وتراث ومنحوتات وكتب ومجلدات وكل ما يثبت الهوية الفلسطينية. طبعا تم حرقة المكان بعد ما تم أيضا، يعني أنا أعتقد أنه تم فقدان الكثير، حوالي 2000 قطعة أثرية كان هنا في هذا المتحف. طبعا كانت قلعة برقوق التي عمرها مئات السنين، كانت هي ملتقى الحضارات. هذا المكان كان ملتقى الحضارات في العالم. طبعا كانت في خان يونس هذا المكان مجمع، كانت هنا الطريق من الشام إلى مصر إلى الخليج إلى السعودية.
Recent reports say that Israeli forces deliberately fired on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. This has escalated tensions in an already volatile region. UNIFIL, the UN interim force in Lebanon, reported that the IDF targeted their positions multiple times, injuring 2 Indonesian peacekeepers. This attack is not only a violation of international law, but also raises concerns about Israel's broader military conduct as its war with Lebanon intensifies. The IDF has justified its actions by alleging Hezbollah's use of civilian areas near UNIFIL posts. However, UNIFIL's claims that IDF soldiers disabled cameras and used drones to scout peacekeeper positions point to a premeditated strike. If verified, these actions could amount to serious violations of international humanitarian law, adding to the scrutiny Israel already faces over its military conduct. This incident also brings the larger issue of Israel's ongoing conflict with Lebanon into focus. Israeli ground incursions into Lebanon are drawing increasing condemnation, not just from the UN, but from countries contributing peacekeeping troops, including Ireland, Italy, and France. With the International Criminal Court considering investigations into war crimes and the International Court of Justice examining claims of genocide, Israel's actions, both in Gaza and along the Lebanese border, are under unprecedented legal and diplomatic pressure.
Newham Council is planning to stop financing Christmas and Eid lights to save £200,000. It has also suggested removing free tea and coffee for staff in its offices and banning internal catering, such as biscuits for meetings, in a desperate bid to save cash. The entirety of the council's fees and charges, excluding parking and commercial rents, are expected to increase by 20%. A council tax reduction scheme, which sees poorer residents face lower payments, could be scaled back as a town hall payment to find £20.3 million of immediate savings at a meeting next week. Newham Council is also proposing it stop maintaining its borrowing greens to save £24,000 a year and cut its fitness schemes for the elderly. Documents, due to be discussed on Tuesday, reveal the council is in discussion with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government for emergency funding in light of the temporary accommodation challenge facing Newham. It is not stated how much the council has requested from the central government, but it's predicting a budget gap of £175 million over the next 3 years. Some £100 million of this would be down to spiralling temporary accommodation costs due to increasing rents and homelessness in the borough, the council said. Newham is supporting around 6,500 families in temporary accommodation and has more than 38,000 households on its social housing waiting list. In the last 12 months to April, it saw 6,685 homelessness applications, up 26% on the previous year. This year alone, it anticipates it will overspend by £47 million, of which £31 million is for housing homeless families and £16 million for social care costs.
The UK is grappling with a demographic shift not seen in nearly half a century, as deaths have now outpaced births, according to new data from the Office for National Statistics (ONS). Excluding the excess deaths caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, this is the first time since the 1970s that the country has faced such a scenario, marking a significant turning point in Britain's population dynamics. ONS figures reveal that, in the year leading up to mid-2023, there were 16,300 more deaths than births across the UK. This reflects broader, long-term trends of declining fertility rates and the natural passing of the baby boomer generation. While the UK's population continues to grow, increasing by 1% to over 68 million people due to high levels of net migration, the fact that deaths have surpassed births is a sobering reminder of the country's demographic challenges. The declining birth rate, a key contributor to this shift, underscores a complex interplay of social, economic, and biological factors. The total fertility rate in England and Wales fell to 1.49 children per woman in 2022, down from 1.55 in the previous year. This is well below the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman needed to maintain a stable population without reliance on migration, as set out by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. The UK stands at a demographic crossroads. The natural population decline, driven by a combination of low fertility rates and the passing of the baby boomers, presents both challenges and opportunities for the country. While immigration remains a key factor in maintaining population growth, the deeper issues of ageing and declining births demand more long-term solutions.
The UK tour of Zwelivelile Mandla Mandela, grandson of Nelson Mandela, has been thrown into turmoil following the UK's refusal to issue him a visa in time for his scheduled flight. Zwelivelile was slated to speak at a series of Palestinian events across British cities, including Sheffield, Manchester and Glasgow. However, he was unable to travel after being informed by British authorities that, contrary to earlier communications, he required a visa to enter the country. Despite high-level interventions from senior ANC figures, the British Embassy has yet to issue the necessary documentation. The delay or possible refusal to issue Mandela's visa has sparked controversy, with accusations that it was politically motivated. His vocal backing of Palestinian resistance, especially following the October 7th attacks, has drawn ire. On that day, Mandela expressed his solidarity with the Palestinians, calling for international support. The UK Home Office has suggested that the visa decisions reflects broader national security concerns, stating that its policies aim to ensure UK welcomes only those in line with its values. This comes amidst public debate following a report in The Times, which questioned the wisdom of granting Mandela entry, given his alleged praise for groups hostile to British interests. On the contrary, Ireland has waived visa requirements, allowing Mandela's grandson to continue his speaking tour in Dublin.
UN Chief Antonio Guterres met with leaders from Southeast Asian countries during the annual ASEAN Summit, where he expressed solidarity with Indonesia following the injury of 2 of its peacekeepers in Lebanon. He underscored the pressing need for peace amid the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Myanmar, and condemned Israeli fire on UN peacekeeper base.
Obviously, I condemn the fact that there was shooting against the UN premise, wounding 2 peacekeepers, which is a violation of international humanitarian law. Peacekeepers must be protected by all parties of the conflict, and what has happened is obviously condemnable. There was naturally a reaction from many sides in solidarity with the peacekeepers that were wounded, and in telling Israel very clearly that this incident is intolerable and it cannot be repeated.
Allow me to express my total solidarity with the Indonesian delegation 2 Indonesian peacekeepers were wounded in Lebanon by Israeli fire, and I want to say that we are together with you and with the Indonesian people in this moment. Meanwhile, Myanmar remains an increasingly complex path. Violence is growing, humanitarian situation is spiraling. 1/3 of the population is in dire need of humanitarian assistance. Millions have been forced to flee their homes. And 7 years after the forced mass displacement of the Rohingya, durable solutions seem a distant reality. I suppose the people of Myanmar need peace, and I call on all countries to leverage their influence towards an inclusive political solution to the conflict and deliver the peaceful future that the people of Myanmar deserve. Peace that is more necessary than ever when you see the immense suffering of the people in Gaza, now extended to Lebanon, not forgetting Ukraine, Sudan, Myanmar, and so many others. And allow me to tell you that the level of death and destruction in Gaza is something that has no comparison with any other situation I've seen since I am Secretary General.
ASEAN leaders reaffirmed the 5-point consensus as the primary framework for addressing the political crisis in Myanmar. They emphasized the necessity of comprehensive implementation to achieve an inclusive and sustainable resolution led by Myanmar itself. The leaders voiced deep concern over the escalating conflicts and humanitarian issues in Myanmar, urging all parties to cease violence immediately. Notably, Myanmar sent a representative to the summit for the first time in 3 years, marking a significant step toward renewed engagement with the ASEAN community. The leaders also acknowledged upcoming meetings dedicated to discussing the situation in Myanmar, further reaffirming ASEAN's commitment to fostering peace and stability in the region.
Omar bin Laden, the son of Al-Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden, has been banned from France after authorities deemed his social media posts an apology for terrorism. The 43-year-old artist had been living in Orne, Normandy, with his British wife for several years, but French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau announced his expulsion on Tuesday. Retailleau explained on social media that Omar had posted a comment on the 2nd of May 2023, the anniversary of his father's death, that praised Osama bin Laden and was seen as glorifying terrorism. The now suspended account had written, "History is written only with the blood of these people. Their blood is the lifeline of our faith until the day of judgment. Rest in peace." The French courts upheld the decision, citing national security concerns, and imposed an administrative ban preventing Omar from returning to France. He was reportedly indicted for condoning terrorism following the post, but was later released before being deported. Omar bin Laden, who took up painting during the COVID-19 lockdown, has gained recognition as an artist, with his work selling for up to €2,000. Despite his estrangement from his father's violent ideology, he expressed regret after Osama bin Laden's 2011 death in Pakistan, criticizing the US operation as an arbitrary execution and calling for a fair trial instead. He had publicly stated that he had been at odds with his father and had always urged him to abandon violence.
Rafael Nadal's retirement marks the end of an unparalleled era in tennis. His career, characterized by relentless determination and incredible athleticism, transcended the boundaries of the sport, making him not only a tennis icon, but a global inspiration. Nadal's Wimbledon victory in 2008 over Roger Federer stands as one of the most memorable moments in tennis history. It wasn't just a triumph over Federer on his favoured surface, but a turning point that redefined what was possible on grass for a clay court specialist. His dominance on the red dirt of Roland Garros, where he won 14 French Open titles, cemented his legacy as the greatest clay court player of all time. Nadal's versatility, winning 2 Wimbledon titles, 4 US Opens and 2 Australian Opens, showed he was far more than a clay specialist. His ability to adapt and change his tactics such as improving his serve and utilizing his topspin heavy forehand, allowed him to compete across all surfaces. As tennis bids farewell to one of its greatest champions, Nadal's legacy extends beyond statistics. His character, work ethic, and humility will continue to inspire future generations, ensuring his name remains synonymous with excellence and integrity in sport.